Hi, my name is Sean Smeed. I'm a composer and audio designer based out of Portland, Oregon. And today I'm going to be going over some of the features for my newest interactive composition composed for a game called Tri-Tonus. In Tri-Tonus, the genre of the background music switches depending on what ability the player is currently using. Now, let me break this down a little bit more. The player can use a sword, they can use an axe, and they can use a bow. When they use the sword, the music in the background is kind of retro. It's a homage to the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo era of music. There's the drum machines and the sine wave synths and arpeggiators and all those kinds of things. When the player is using the axe, the music switches to a rock, almost like a pop punk kind of arrangement of the same song. And when the player uses the bow, the arrangement of the song switches to an orchestral, almost violin concerto kind of arrangement. And so this means that there's three different versions of the same song that could be cycled through at any time depending on what weapon the player is using. And along with that, there's certain sound effects are tied in when you are in the rock mode. For example, when you attack, it makes the sound almost like you're slapping a guitar. It's like, doom. Or when you are using the bow, the orchestral bow, when you pluck your bow, it goes, it has a kind of tonal sound of almost like plucking some strings while you throw the bow. And when you use your sword, when you're in the 8-bit sword, it kind of makes one of these old school video game kind of shing kind of sounds, right? So there's sound effects tied into the different states of or the different genres as well. And there's also high score solos that are tied into each one of these, meaning that if you get a high score and you're in the rock mode, a guitar solo will start playing. And if you get a high score while the orchestral one is playing, the violin concerto will start becoming more noticeable and intense. And likewise, when you are in the retro video game kind of song, an arpeggiated synth will start to come in. So all of this kind of, I think, hopefully will give the player almost a feeling of being like a DJ, of being able to kind of switch abilities and switch the song and have power to bring in the guitar solo and just hopefully really immerse them in the experience sonically to I don't know, that's just what I do. That's what I like to do. So let's jump into how this works. We're gonna start with ProTools, start with the ProTools file with the actual composition. Then we're going to move to Wwise to see how it gets implemented, and then we're going to move over to Unity and Visual Code to see how it actually got in the game, how it gets integrated. So let's go. Let me shrink this down. Okay, so in the ProTools file, the different genres are color-coded here. At the bottom yellow, this is the retro one. You can see that it says retro bus, the synths, all that stuff, the drum kit as well. This big red one here is the rock. This is actually the first one that I did. I recorded the guitar and bass first. Those are kind of the first. I kind of carved it out from kind of jamming on the guitar. It kind of brought me back almost to the old music that my bands used to play, like this pop punk kind of music with almost a dirty kind of mixing and mastering. And then up here above the big blot of red, this is all the orchestral arrangement. So we're going to take kind of like a little preview look at each one of them. So starting with the one that I composed first, which is this rock one. It's fast and upbeat and meant to be exciting here. Also kind of brings me back to being a kid a bit. So we have that one. We also have this. It's kind of 8-bit one here. And then lastly, we have the orchestral one. Now, I'm going to let the orchestral one play out a little bit longer. The orchestral one is color-coded by family instrument groups. So the purple is the woodwinds, the brass is these golden ones here, the percussion is the brown, the choir is the purple, the pink. The solo violin is the big blue one right here, and then the rest of the strings are these purple ones here. So I'm going to let this one play out a little bit more because it's a little bit more involved. Let's go. You can... So from there, it just loops. It's it's about 45 seconds or so, and each genre has its own solo. There's a solo violin, there's solo guitar, and there's a synthesizer solo, which for some reason wants to be blotted out, but that's okay because it's already in the Wwise project. Let's head over there to the Wwise project and see how it all kind of gets put together. So I'm going to go to the designer layout first, and let's talk about game syncs. Come on, let's talk about games. We're going to talk about music switches. So to set up a music switch container, which is ultimately what I want to do here, that means that we have to kind of have the different switches that we want to go to already put in. So we got the guitar, retro, and violin switch here. I'm not really going to go into how you do this. I'm kind of going to talk as if you already know what Wwise is. Maybe someday I'll make a video breaking down how you can do this all. But for now, I'm just going to kind of speed right ahead. I have the score switches. I also have some other switches that have more to do with the sound effects, player health. I have some states, combat or transition, phases that are live. I have some RTPCs, background controller, damage sidechain. That one I might break down a little bit later on. Damage to boss, distortion, pause filter, player health, score, all that good stuff. So the main ones for the music are going to be the music switch container for the guitar, retro, violin. It's going to have that as well as the score. So let's go over and let's first take a quick look at these music playlists and the segments. So you can see that there's three kind of sections here. There's the 8-bit inside of the music switch container, which is here. We have stingers, which just has some death stuff. You can kind of ignore that for now. We have the 8-bit playlist, we have the classical playlist, and we have the rock playlist. And I'm just kind of going to put them so that you can see them right next to each other. Here they are, right? And inside of each one of these music segments, music playlists, there are music segments here that we can see that there's the main track and then there's the solo track here, right? And we want the solo track to be attached to the high score switch. So that's what it's doing over here when it's attached to the score switch. And then here in this tiny little letters right here, you can see that it's attached to the high score. Each one of the music playlists has this kind of basic formula. There's the main track, and then attached to a high score switch is the solo. And once we put them all into the music switch container, and here they are, and we have the different paths lined out. The main paths that really matter are just player life and music switch, the phases for combat and transition, and score. The score is already figured inside of each individual music segment, so that's not something that we really have to make a path to in this case. So it's all there. The next thing to kind of just take a look at is the transition rules really quick. We want to just make sure that things are moving on beat, that the exit source is on the next beat, that the fade out is at 0.43 seconds, which I think happens to be a half note in the tempo, 2 beats at whatever the tempo is. I think the tempo is pretty fast, like 160 or something. What is it? 140? No, that seems too slow. I guess it is 140. So, oh wait, hold on. Yep. So we got all that. That's great. And the transition rules here, we have it moving to the next beat. The other really important part is this right here, the destination, jump to start of playlist and same times as playing segment. So this means that the music switch container is going to keep track of where each one of the measures are. So if I'm at measure 8 in the 8-bit segment and the player switches to the classical segment, it will switch it to measure 8 in the classical one as well, right? Over here, right? Okay, so the transition rules have been set for the music switch container. The paths have been defined. Let's see if it actually works. So let's go over to the mixing and let's see. Let's start with the rock one, and we'll do regular, and we'll see if the guitar solo comes in when I switch to the high score. So I'm going to be clicking this set high score switch right here. Let's go. And here I go. So I hear that. Now let's have the guitar solo come in. Awesome. Let's switch it to 8-bit. And to violin. And back to guitar. Awesome. Let's take the violin away. There it goes. And it also, of course, loops on beat. So this is great. It's all working, right? I could also be using this event right here to switch. And let's say that the player dies. Bam, there they go. The dead, it shuts off everything else, and then it actually, I think it has a stop. The whole music, yeah. It stops everything. So great, the transitions work and everything. So that's how the music switch container will work. And the idea is that these switches, where it says set 8-bit switch, set guitar switch, set violin switch, these will be attached to buttons that the player can click, right? And let's just investigate a couple more things, and then we'll go into the Unity and visual code. So fine, we got all that. Let's see if how the player attacks work. So I'm going to go back here and go to the actor mixer hierarchy, which is where the sound effects are kept. Now, in a game like this, the sound effects tend to be kind of tonal and timed as well, which is, different from game to game. But in this one, what we have for the player attacks, we have a large switch container, and inside of them we have sequence containers. So let's just listen to this really quick. So let's say that I'm on the player attack, and it's a guitar. You can kind of hear it's like that slapping axe coming down. I actually recorded myself slapping my guitar and then put like a drum behind it or something. I also kind of pitched down the end, almost like it had a whammy bar. My guitar doesn't have a whammy bar, but if you know Pro Tools, I just use the Verify plugin. Cool. So what about when you attack something, or if we use the bow when you're using the classical? I love this sound. This sound effect was actually made by Forrest Yang, and Forrest also, at my request, put them to the chord progression of this song as well, which is really neat. The retro, the sword, same thing. And this is that kind of more 8-bit kind of sound there. So, do these work with all the switches? Well, of course they do. Well, we already know because I'm using this switch right here. However, to make sure that they come in over the music, we want to actually sidechain. And sidechaining, if you are familiar with Wwise at all, you know that sidechaining is different than ducking. Ducking is the main way that Wwise wants to use stuff. In fact, they even have this little duck signal. And what ducking is, ducking will lower the channel. Let's say that I want the attack to cut through the background music. It will actually duck before the sound actually happens. The sound of the background music will go lower as soon as I click play on the event. which works for certain things like dialogue, right? You want to kind of bring it down in those milliseconds before they start talking. But with sound effects, you don't actually want it to duck until the decibels are at a certain point, and this is what's typically used in sidechain compression in a DAW, right? But Wwise isn't really a DAW, and the way that we have to do this is through using a metering plugin by turning the output of the player attacks from the bus. You take that and you turn it into an output on an RTPC, and then you tie the RTPC of the background music to the input of that metering. So that sounds like a bunch of gibberish. Let me see if I can break it down a little bit, just because I think it's kind of interesting, and it's one of these things that isn't really straightforward in Wwise at first. Let's take a look at like player attack and effects, and we see this metering, and here in the output, right? So if I am playing the player attack, we can see there it is right there, right? So we want to turn the output gain meter into a gain parameter, and we want to set the minimum and maximum to be the same as this meter here, so that when it reads it, it's reading that it is whatever it is at over here. So 0, right? And then we want to go to the background music bus, and we want to actually put that RTPC here, so that when that happens, this ducks over here. Now, for some reason, it doesn't actually show it in real time when like it does with the other RTPCs. However, you can hear it and you can see it in the actual faders over here. So let's say that I have the guitar switch going and the player attacks. You're going to see this duck down when this player attack bus goes up. And you can kind of hear how it ducks it, right? Okay. And this is the same for all these other ones as well. It's a little bit more subtle here because it's not as loud. It's not as big of one. But it is still kind of ducking. And same with the violin. This way, the sound isn't actually the sound of the background music isn't cutting out before the sound actually happens, which is what happens when you have an event, because there's some milliseconds before the transient, depending on what kind of sound you're using, and if you duck, then you don't. It doesn't feel as natural. It doesn't feel like it's actually compressing it based off of, it doesn't feel like it's lowering the volume based off of the input of the volume. It feels like it's just like kind of setting a switch. So anyway, that's how that works. The last thing that I want to talk about is the player damage, which is the sound effect that is tied to the score not the score, the player's health. So the player has 3 hearts, right? And over here on these RTPCs, we see this score. Now, the reason that this is done in an RTPC and isn't done in like a switch of 3, 2, 1 is because there's other things that we want to tie to the player health. For example, there's a filter that can happen when the player is really low on health, right? There's all sorts of things that an RTPC gives you what's called a slew rate, which means that you can control the rate at which those filters, let's say that you are at 1 heart and you heal, you can have that fade, you can control that. It's hard to explain that filter in a little bit more accurately using a slew rate, which is attached to an RTPC. So this is why I chose to use an RTPC here rather than using player health as a switch or a state. Anyway, so because that's attached there, the player's damage sounds, as you get hurt more and more, get more and more dramatic. And this is done through creating a blend container, of course. So in player damage, here we have a switch container that holds 3 different blend containers. And all a blend container is, it says, okay, play this sound when the player is at 2. Let's take a look at the classical These are also sound effects made by the other audio guy on the team, Forrest Yang. And so you can hear that as the player loses health, these sound effects get a little bit more intense. And then this last one. This last one has the deepest bass, is the most intense. And this goes for all of them. If I switch it over to the retro one, this is kind of the classic, kind of punchy stuff for the retro. And then for the rock, let's see. Yeah. Okay. So these are all set to not only the state that the player is in of the genre, but also the player health, right? So let's just check this out on the mixer really quick. And let's see if this works. Let's say that my player health is at 2. And let's say that I'm playing guitar. And you can hear that filter and sidechain compression, there's volume happening, and that same RTBC is also connected to this. And let's say that I have one heart left, and let's say that I get hit again. But let's say this time I get hit on violin. And we can see it reacting there. And finally, let's say that I get hit for the last time on 8-bit. There it is, right? Of course, in the game, if I do get hit for the last time, that death sound also will happen. All right, so that kind of goes over most of the systems, and what I really wanted to do was make it as economical as possible. As you can see, there's a lot of sounds in here. There's a lot of different things going on, but there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different events altogether, right? Not very many based off of how much music is really going on. So this is good because this makes it much simpler to integrate into Unity. And if you know anything about integrating Wwise into Unity, it is a lot of, it can be complicated. It can be complicated. I like to keep it as simple as possible because I am not a very proficient coder by any means. Let's jump over to Unity and take a look at what the state of the game is right now. So in this game, and let's see, I might have to cheat and get past the first bit here and give myself some extra health just so I can kind of talk. On the side here, you can see that we have all of these sets and switches and player health and RTPCs and all this. This is all kind of put in here already onto the player script. And yep. So I haven't really earned the right to switch my genre yet. I'm going to give myself 100 health just so that I don't die during this example. Oh, a bit of an evil laugh there. And, terrible at this game. But, okay, presuming that I live long enough, and because I have 100 health, I'm probably good to just sit here for a second. We can kind of see here that we have the weapon switches. We have all of those events, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then the death event is actually tied to a different prefab. But that's all there is here. And that gives us, I think 40 different combinations of sounds and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure that the next phase is coming up pretty soon. There it is. Yep. All right, so now we're going to be able to switch to rock. Bam. And there's that guitar sound. Get out. Oh, missed. Let's switch back. And it works. Oh, I guess I didn't set myself to have 100 health. Anyway, that's too bad because I wanted to show you the violin one as well. But the violin one is in there as well. We can take a look quickly at the player script to see how this all fits together. Let me open it up. Okay, so like I said, I am not a coder. This was definitely a collaborative effort between myself and the programmer of the game, Skylar Zartman. I know how to write a few lines of code, and they all have to do with Wwise. I know how to create a public variable here so that these show up, so that I can put the events in. I know how to basically I know how to use Wwise with code, and that's about it. So anything that you see here, this is mainly the work of Skylar, and with a little bit of me in there. So my goal, my art, hopefully, is in this program, is creating a intuitive, easy event system so that the programmer can say, oh yeah, I want to set the guitar switch here. Oh yeah, this is where I want to do this. So I think that was accomplished here. They don't ever have to worry about doing anything except for changing the instrument. And when you change the instrument with the set switch, that changes the sound effects, that changes the damage sound effects, the player attack sound effects, that changes the possibilities for the solos. All of that is done from within Wwise here. So the only things that have to be called are the events themselves. Are this weapon switch 1, for example, which is going to be 8-bit switch. Weapon switch 2, which is going to be the guitar switch, right? And we can kind of go down the line here, and we can see how this works really quickly. And we can see that certain events, player damage post, for example, here, right? And that's all they got to do. They don't have to worry about which state the player is in. They don't have to worry about any of that, as long as they just switch the state when the player clicks the get key, right? So when the player clicks 1 to change to guitar, or changes to click 1, right, or 2. Here we had a little bit of a cheat sheet for if we wanted to access the high score, which still isn't quite implemented yet, but we can do that by clicking P. Let's see. Yeah, just kind of going through this is pretty self-explanatory, right? Player attack post. If that's all they have to do. They don't have to worry about they don't have to worry about what state or switch they're in at all. All they have to worry about is when this happens, do the attack. And inside of that attack event from Wwise is all of the knowledge about the states and which one and the blends. And that's really the awesome thing about Wwise, is that it makes it really easy for a musician and a musical thinker to create these systems without too much coding. Now, of course, you do have to know a little bit, and I'm not saying that I don't know any. There's more than I'd like to admit. I've spent time in these scripts, but for the most part, all I'm doing when I'm setting these scripts is posting an event, or tying a game parameter to an event, tying an RTPC to an event, right? So, for example, the player health event, right? The player health, I think, is, let's see, health RTPC. Yeah. So the player health RTPC gets set a couple of times, or actually just once, I think, right? Yeah. Set global value to whatever the current health is, and current health looks like it's its own function. So, great. This, to me, is a success for Wwise, because it's a simple system that allows for a lot of variation, a lot of fun, a lot of interaction between the music and the player. I'm really excited to see where this game goes. The game itself is still in the early stage, but yeah, the systems are all there. I'm going to try one more time. I'm going to try to win. Let's see. I might cheat and give myself a little bit more health. Let's do 10. All right, here we go. Let's see if I can win.
You can't hurt me.
That was my partner, by the way, when we recorded. I'm doing all right so far. These kind of games, definitely Definitely not excellent at these kinds of games, but I'm more of a Dark Souls kind of person myself. All right, here we go. All right, and let's see. Get out of here. So I heard the player sound, I heard the player health. You can switch. The item sounds different. And there I just switched between the two different effects. And let's also... Ah, come on. Well, just one time from Wwise, then I'll play the the classical one as a final. Anyway, this project has been really fun to make. It's a bit late, sorry if I'm starting to get rambly. Just wanted to make sure that this was documented somehow. I'll definitely update it with the finished version once we get there. But I think, for the most part, I mean, this is for a game jam. I'm pretty sure that this is pretty close to what it's going to be. This has been about 1 week of work doing all of this. A lot of work for 1 week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let's switch it up a little bit. Thank you, Forrest, for the extra sound effects, and also he recorded that guitar solo there. Thank you, Skylar, for the programming. It's always fun working with you guys. I've worked on a couple of games with them now. We did one called Menagerie, which I actually produced, which is like an interactive music puzzle game. We did one called Juice for the Juice God, which is a fruit smashing game. We've done this is our fourth game together, our fourth little game together. So it's always fun working with you guys. Anyway, it is late for me, so I am going to sign off. But thanks so much for watching this video. Thanks for checking it out. I'm really excited about locking in with a team. These people, also another programmer that I love to work with named Matthew. Really excited about kind of finding these people. Oh man, my hair is going crazy. And being able to bring these interactive music dreams to life. This is, if you know anything about the work that I've done before, I've tried this idea before with a game called Music Demon. I might put that in the link bio. It was like much shorter, much like a 15-20 second loop where you're a demon that eats musicians. This is kind of like an evolved version of that, and I hope that I get to work with this idea again. And on an even bigger project with more songs and more genres. I mean, this is just the coolest thing in the world to me. I've been doing interactive music now for about maybe 10 months, 11 months. It's coming up on a year in I guess like 9 months or so. Switched over from doing like classical composition, and it is just a blast. This has just been so much fun to work on, and like I said, I'm tired, I'm rambling, but I'm gonna head out. Thank you guys for checking it out. Thanks for watching. Have a good night, everyone.